Super Mario 64 is the most influential game ever created. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you're yelling at me about how wrong I am. Maybe you're just wondering when the Mike and Tyler bathwater flavors come out on Patreon. But if you are firing shots in the comments, you aren't taking the monumental depth of impressions this game has made. Not just on the gaming sphere, but on individual people, on me and my generation of degenerates, and on Mario as a whole. See, many people credit Mario 64 for transitioning Mario into 3D space, but that's not at all how I would describe it. Look at Mario 64 versus any 2D Mario game. They are so unbelievably different that I wouldn't say Mario transitioned into 3D at all. No, he evolved. Like a phallic metapod into a less phallic Butterfree. Our plumber plunged his way through iconic green pipes into a new paradigm of existence. The world of polygons. Like Minecraft, but with more shapes. A world where we arrived to a completely new playground with a character equipped from the get-go with every move you could think of to parkour your way from point A to point B. Namely, the intro pipe to Peach's panties. But not just those points! It pioneered the 3D space in a way no one had before. Mario controlled unlike any other 3D character and became the foundation not just for 3D, but for open world, for exploration, for, well, nearly everything we hold dear in our 3D games today. So join me on a personal tale of love and overalls, of mustachioed men that stole my little boy heart forever, of Gay Bowser and his plot of nonsensicalness. This is the story of Super Mario 64, the story ye never knew. Whoa! Come on! Let's get a bit personal, shall we? The uncreative yet very Nintendo-y named Super Mario 64 came out with the Nintendo 64 in 1996. I know. I was there. I was just a wee lad, barely versed in the dance of the love, ignorant of the ways that gaming would forever rock my world from this moment forward. The N64 entered my peripheral from across the room. We locked eyes and the tension between us was instant. I wanted it, and it wanted me just as much. Without a word, I took her to my bedroom and hooked her up to my TV. Blowing sensually into its cartridge hole, I carefully plunged my game into its crevice, and a night of untold pleasure began. That's the stuff. As time went on, I began to learn her likes and dislikes. Nothing turned her on like switching on the on-off switch. It was magical. The N64 was the first console I ever owned, and it was the first one I ever had that I was actually old enough to play games semi-decently on. But at age 5, I still couldn't do much with Super Mario 64. I was dumb and young and didn't really care about game progression, but that's where we start to see the true beauty of Super Mario 64. It was a game anyone could play. Even in my genius yet infantile state, I enjoyed the ever-loving shit out of this game. It was amazing. I could surf on shells in the very first level. I could fly through the sky not long after. It held mysterious monsters and secrets. The chain chomp was somewhat scary, but that eel scared the crap out of little me. It still gives me the heebie-jeebies to this day. Eels are like slimy, flexible phalluses of the sea. But that's just my point. This game encapsulated my attention as a 5-year-old. Have you ever seen a 5-year-old? They can't focus on anything. It's why every parent now owns an iPad so their kid will shut up for 5 minutes and they can rest, because life is tiring. A game that can encapsulate an audience at that age and still be engaging to an older audience is doing it all. It certainly did it all for me. It put me on my path of gaming and eventually brought me to where I am today, a lover of video games who enjoys bright open-world exploration and talks into a microphone about loving a game console sexually and romantically. Mario 64 taught me to love that. In a very real way, that game shaped the me you hear in your ear holes. And while I'm sure my story of lust and realization applies to many millennials, this game has done so much more than just tantalize kiddly-coos in a dance of love. Mario 64 is the reason we have open-world exploration games like so many of our games today. Nintendo was truly the first company to refine this idea, and surprisingly, they experimented with 3D exploration in Mario instead of their far more obvious first-party choice, Zelda. 2D Zelda games were the epitome of open-world exploration adventures. It would have made far more sense for Zelda's first 3D title to be the paradigm shift that gaming needed to expand the open-world and exploration genres. Yet, it wasn't. But why? Was this just a complete fluke? Did Miyamoto lay out his design for Zelda during Nintendo's sake-drenched karaoke brainstorming nights that definitely happened and accidentally wrote Mario on the front instead of Zelda in a rice wine-infused haze? Of course not! We all know Miyamoto prefers the Dankalank and magic mushrooms. The Nintendo 64 3D first-party games released during a time of growth and experimentation. Nintendo finally left its parents' house, had the classic college same-sex experience, and decided, yeah, I can totally go both ways, making excellent 2D and 3D games. However, Mario up until that point had always been side-scrollers. You go left to right, the worlds are in order, and you can't reach the next level without finishing the previous one, barring the use of some bullshit cheese flute that blasts you forward 3 levels. The main deterrents were enemy patterns mixed with simple platforming. That was Mario, the Mario formula, if you will. Zelda, on the other hand, had always been about exploration, finding new things in unexpected ways and not necessarily doing everything in a certain order. But we saw a transfer of ideas in their 3D games, a cross-pollination, if you will. Zelda became much more streamlined, creating the Egoraptor coined term Zelda formula, where you go through a dungeon, find an item you need halfway through to complete the dungeon, and then hit a boss in its glowy private part, followed by a few sword thrusts for damage. In retrospect, Zelda should have been the first game to truly emphasize exploration and movement in a 3D space based on the previous installments to the series. But instead, Nintendo linearized Zelda and opened up Mario, taking both franchises in new directions and making Super Mario 64 one of the first truly open-world games while simultaneously discarding everything from the Mario formula. Enemies weren't the main obstacle anymore. Platforming in 3D became the difficulty setting. You have a variety of levels to choose from at any point, and you can revisit them at any time. You were rewarded for exploring and finding secrets, whether in the levels or in the castle itself. The first level, Bomb Bomb Battlefield, allows you to get a feel for Mario while keeping you in a safe space. You can't fall out of the level like you can in most other levels. There's minimal enemies and easy-to-read rolling ball bearings to practice all your jumps and movement in 3D. It's designed as a testing ground for new players, a place to practice everything the game gives you without the worry of messing up. Even the stars are all about introducing you to the game's mechanics. Learn how to get around King Bomb Bomb or simply jump over him. You also learn how to grab items and throw from his boss fight. Then you practice your movement at a faster pace while racing Koopa the Quick. He's a fastie. The first 4 stars are all about understanding how Mario moves, but the 5th star you can't get until you unlock the wing cap, which is impossible until you have 10 stars. The game is introducing the idea of leaving a level and coming back later right from square one. You don't need to do it all at the same time. In fact, you literally can't. And yes, you can technically get the 5th star without the wing cap, but the idea was still there, okay? No one cares about your technicalities! Then you eventually get those 10 stars and suddenly the heavens open up from above. That shining white light wasn't there before. What can I do with it? I guess the only thing I can do is look up at the light. I mean, I shouldn't look this on too long if I ever want to see Ryan Reynolds naked, but it's pretty. And suddenly, zoom! You're zipping through the sky like a flying squirrel on PCP! The game just taught you there's secrets completely outside the levels, and power-ups to unlock for use in the levels. And boy, are there so many secrets, way more than I will ever know. But luckily, our friend SwankyBox here he's here to shed some light. Hit it, Brad, you handsome fella.
So I think that idea of discovering things outside of levels is what brought about so many rumors about of things this game contained. By now, most of us have heard of the El Israel 2401 mystery. The idea that the star statue in the back held a secret to unlocking Luigi in the game. The obvious problem is that it's super hard to make out what the message says. But the reason why we were so adamant about trying to solve this mystery was because we were rewarded elsewhere for doing things outside the ordinary. From secret breakable walls to characters like Mips reappearing within the castle as our quest carried on. This kept us always moving and always exploring. When something happened, our minds would race and we wanted more. So just like Grant said, being able to look at something like the sun painting in the lobby instilled the idea that our curiosity would always be rewarded. This also spawned ideas like trying to find the ghoul medal within Big Boo's haunt. The sign out front mentions it, but it's just a play on words. But due to our previous findings and discoveries, we didn't have an off switch. We sought out mysteries in this new 3D world when there were no real other mysteries to be discovered at the time. This turned into playground rumors and lunch table discussions, since majority of us lacked the internet. But to this day, people are still finding lots of amazing things within the game, from impossible coins to Goombas that spawn on the death barrier, and so much more. That's what makes Super Mario 64 such a beautiful game. Heck, I'm still messing around and finding tons of weird stuff. Did you know Chain Chomps float underwater? Or that it's possible to create a zombie Bowser? I'm constantly documenting stuff like this on my YouTube channel, and I stumble upon new stuff all the time. Super Mario 64 truly is the game that keeps on giving.
Thanks, Brad. I love you. You're so knowledgeable. I'm attracted to knowledge. Mario 64 is one of the only 3D open world games I know that lets the player learn through the gameplay. In one level, it teaches you everything you need to know with extremely minimal tutorials except for stuff like the camera on a stick. It's a beautiful example of letting the player learn through experience rather than thrusting every single tutorial you can possibly imagine into the game. Sorry, Monster Hunter. It's this understanding of a player's desire to explore, find secrets, and learn themselves that made Mario 64 so engaging right from the beginning. But it did so much more for gaming overall. I said earlier that Mario 64 shifted into a new paradigm of gaming, and while that's true, it shifted into that paradigm by creating a paradigm to shift into. Miyamoto and all his substances really got him in the mind space to revolutionize. Now, this isn't to say that Mario 64 was the first 3D platformer. It wasn't. But it was the first 3D platformer that perfected the medium, in my opinion. There are stories that Miyamoto spent hours playing in the game's testing area, doing nothing but running and jumping to fine-tune the controls. So it's no wonder that Mario feels good to play as. This is something that still is forgotten in so many games. We get a lot of games where our characters feel clunky. Sure, they move fine and their animation is flawless, but the movement itself just isn't that fun. Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, and Shadow of War are two games that come to mind when I think of a good game that isn't that fun to control. Comparatively, Spider-Man for the PS4 is an absolute blast to control. When the best part of a game is the movement of the character, you're doing something right. Because that allows any level to be fun. You just need to base the game around the movement. Because when you're always moving and moving is fun, then you're always having fun. Get it? That's how Mario 64 feels. Mario is just fun to play as, and founded this idea that a player could be fun to play. It's dope! And on top of that, the controller was designed for 3D movement. The N64 was one of the first controllers released with an analog stick. At this point, we'd be amazed if a controller didn't have an analog stick. Hell, 2 is the norm per controller now. But back then, the Nintendo 64 popularized the analog stick because it allowed for such precise controls in open world movement. The design concept of an open world with levels you can jump into at any time. Replaying levels because there's multiple goals within them to beat. Letting the player choose what they want to do and making the goals completely based on their desire to explore paved a new template for video games in the 3D space. Emphasizing tight controls, a mix of realistic and completely unrealistic physics, such as the conservation of momentum and building up speed versus being able to change direction or slow down midair, all led to what I really think Mario 64 is. The father of modern gaming. When you look at 3D games today, really look at their mechanics. There's not a single one that doesn't take ideas originating from Mario 64. The gaming world as we know it was birthed from this one singular point and created this expectation that Mario 3D games will take the gaming sphere to a new level of excellence. We saw the same entrepreneurial ideas in Super Mario Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey. Each one is considered one, if not the best game for its time because of the unique mechanics and gameplay they brought to the table. Odyssey is still my favorite game on the Switch to this day, and it all started with this polygonal mustache that pioneered a new way to make games. Super Mario 64 was the big bang for gaming. The N64 is big bangable. I can't keep my hands out of its orifices. I want to take it out to dinner, bring it home, and make it feel like it makes me feel. There's so much chemistry here. From this, an explosion occurred that shaped galaxies, constellations, planets, everything. And while we may not think about the Big Bang every day, we can see its afterglow literally everywhere. Super Mario 64 changed gaming on that scale. A cosmic scale. A scale that is incomprehensible because we live within the results to this very day. That's the story of Super Mario 64. One of the most influential games ever created. That's the story. You never knew. Thanks so much to SwankyBox for helping us out with this video. We really appreciate it, dude. If you haven't checked out the Swankster's channel, that link is in the description. He's part of the tribe. And do you know who else is a member of our galactic consciousness? This video's sponsor, Dashlane. Dashlane is a desktop and mobile app that makes all irritating and risky parts of our daily digital life easier and safer. It's got everything you need. Password manager, check. VPN, check. Autofill for your info? Dark web monitoring? Breach alerts? Check. Cubed. I know what you're thinking, beautiful viewer. What if Dashlane gets hacked? I'm screwed! Nope. Dashlane stores and decrypts your information locally on your device using your master password. Nobody but you gets access to your super secret info. I hate trying to remember all my different passwords and entering my information for every single site I use. But Dashlane does it all for me, and it can do it for you too. That's why Dashlane is trusted by over 11 million users in 180 countries. Go to dashlane.com/Treesicle, where the first 200 people will enjoy 10% off using code Treesicle and get a free premium trial for 30 days. And thanks to Dashlane again for sponsoring this video. I really hope you check them out. Every sponsor that supports us is so helpful to our bottom line, so help them, help us, and it's a beautiful thing. Lots of helping. I'm Grant. I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.